In this video, I will show all the components you need for a gaming PC. I will be explaining in an easy to understand way for beginners. I won't be going in depth about each component. The first component you need to choose is the CPU. The CPU is the component that takes care of all the processing needed to execute tasks in your computer, like running programs. There are two choices. It is either Intel or AMD. Your choice depends on your necessities. There are different price points, from budget to high-end PC. With the introduction of Zen architecture, the gap between the performances of these two CPU manufacturers is really small. So you can go wrong with either of them. AMD offers the best bang for the buck and productivity performance, but Intel still has the crown for the best gaming CPU, at least for now. After choosing your CPU, you will need the proper motherboard for it. The motherboard is where all the other components connect to. There are different sockets for CPUs, and you must make sure that it is compatible with the motherboard. The next component is the RAM. It is used to store information that are currently in use by the computer. They have various amount of capacities, such as 4GB, 8GB, 16GB, and so on. Their speed is measured by their frequencies and timings. The higher the frequency and the lower the timings, the better it is. If you're building a computer with new products, you'll need to look at DDR4 memories, which is the latest generation. I recommend 2 DIMMs of 8GB for a total of 16GB of RAM. That's enough for gaming in 1080p. Now let's talk about the most important component of a gaming PC. And of course it is the RGB. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually the graphics card. This component takes care of all the data and information that is needed to display on your monitor. The better the graphics card, the more frames per second or FPS it can produce. The higher the FPS, the more fluid the movement becomes, which is more pleasurable to see. The maximum FPS you can actually see depends on the frequency of your monitor. Most monitors are rated at 60Hz or 60 FPS, so even if your graphics card is able to produce, for example, 144 FPS, your monitor is only able to display 60 FPS. Most competitive gamers prefer higher FPS, not only being more fluid, it also improves the latency and helps them react much faster. Now let's talk about the storage. As the name applies, it stores all the data and information you need in a computer, for example games, browser applications, photos, and more. There are 3 main different types of storage you should consider: hard disks, solid-state drives or SSDs, or NVMe SSDs. The hard drive offers the most capacity to store data for the price, but lacks the speed. It takes longer to load games, photos, or applications. SSD is the middle ground, less capacity than a hard drive, but faster for the same price. Then, there is the NVMe SSD, the fastest type of storage you can buy, but it's a lot more expensive for the same amount of storage. Just make sure your motherboard has NVMe slots before you buy an NVMe SSD. I recommend you buy an SSD with a capacity of at least 200 to 500GB, and then a 1TB hard drive. You install your operating system into the SSD and the most important applications or games you mostly use, and then the hard drive for all the other files you don't need as much. With all these components, you need something to power it up, and the job for that is the power supply. The power supply is really important. Do not buy cheap, unreliable power supplies. It is the component that supplies electricity to all the other components inside your computer. It's like the computer's heart. There are different types of power supplies: non-modular, semi-modular, and modular. Non-modular power supplies have all the cables directly connected to it, and it's not detachable. Semi-modular power supplies have only the 24-pin power connector directly connected and not detachable. All the other cables are detachable. And then there's the modular power supply. You guessed it, it has no cables. No, I'm just kidding. It does have, and they are all detachable. What's the use for detachable cables, you might ask? It is for cable management. It's rare that you use all the cables in a power supply, so being able to remove the ones you don't use gives you more space inside the case. Power supplies can have different power outputs: 400, 500, 750 watts, and so on. It is recommended to get 500 watts. It is more than enough for a mid-range gaming PC. Now, let's choose the case. The case houses all of your components, so make sure it can fit them all. There are a lot of different cases from manufacturers such as NZXT, Cooler Master, Corsair, and much more. It's up to you which one to choose. It's personal preference. Just make sure everything fits and it has decent ventilation capability to keep your components cool. Speaking about cooling, your CPU usually has an included cooler, but if it doesn't, you can choose from two types of coolers, air and liquid cooler. I recommend buying an air cooler if you're just starting out in PC buildings. And for case fans, normally cases come with an exhaust fan. Other times, they also come with intake fans. Just make sure before you buy a case, check how many fans is included. I recommend having 2 intake fans from the front, 1 exhaust from the back, 1 from the top if your case has top vents. It should be enough to have decent airflow inside your case to cool all your components. Thank you very much for watching this video and hope you liked it. Leave your comments down below on what you think about the video. I'll talk to you next time.